Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's conversation on energy efficient cities, a webinar brought to you by the Alliance for a Sustainable Future. This is an initiative of the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. My name is Amy Bailey, and I'm the Director for Sustainability and Engagement at C2ES, and today I am joined by Dennis Murphy, the Chief Environmental Officer for Kansas City, Missouri, and Tim Duff, the General Manager of Regulatory Strategy and Evaluation at Duke Energy. Before we get started today, I want to share a few housekeeping items. First, all participants will be muted throughout the webinar, but questions will be taken after both presenters are sharing their remarks, and these can be submitted via the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel at the right side of your screen. This webinar will be recorded and shared when we are done. And so to kick things off today, I do want to provide a little bit of information about the Alliance for a Sustainable Future, which is hosting this webinar today. This is a partnership between the U.S. Conference of Mayors and C2ES. We have a steering committee of mayors and business leaders, and our goal is to create a framework for mayors and business leaders to develop and share concrete approaches to reduce carbon emissions, speed the deployment of new technology, and respond to climate change impacts. To date, we have produced case studies, a number of webinars, 2 nationwide surveys of cities, policy briefs, and hosted a number of events. I've listed our websites on the screen here in case you want to visit our pages and learn more about what we've been up to. Now, to kind of kick things off with the focus of our webinar today being energy efficiency, I want to pull in a little bit of information that we gathered through our work with the Alliance. Now, for 2 years now, the Alliance has conducted an annual survey to collect information to empower cities and businesses to accelerate climate action together. Our survey collected responses in the summer of 2018 from 156 cities of all sizes across the country. And I've listed a few of our outcomes from our work on the screen. Notably, half of cities have energy efficiency policies or incentives for new and existing residential buildings. And more than half of responding cities have energy efficiency policies or incentives for new and existing commercial buildings. Now, 58% of cities are interested in partnering with the business community to advance energy efficiency. But this practice is already underway in 28% of responding cities. These partnerships take a variety of forms, including sustainability commissions, local green business designations, engaging chambers of commerce, and working with utilities. Cities also noted many opportunities for partnerships that link government-led renewable energy programs with energy efficiency initiatives. They noted many opportunities to help lower the costs and barriers to energy efficiency, perhaps by developing revolving funds to allow easier access to capital for investments, and to expand campaigns and programs that target local businesses. These types of activities align well with what our speakers will share today. But just to kind of add to this background and set the stage for today's conversation, I do want to provide a little bit of extra detail about, why we're talking about energy efficiency in particular as a climate solution. So some facts about the emissions reductions that we need. About 29% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to the residential and commercial sector, and there is room for improvement. Since 2005, the residential sector emissions have dropped by nearly 17%, and commercial sector emissions have dropped 11%. However, as we look forward, the increased use of appliances and electronics, as well as a changing climate, is expected to result in a net increase in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So the efficiency gains that are being pursued will help moderate future emissions growth and help keep U.S. emissions targets within reach. Now, there's another reason, obviously, to pursue energy efficiency, and that is noted recently in the National Climate Assessment, which is for grid resilience. The recently released assessment explains that higher temperatures are projected to drive up electricity costs by increasing demand, reducing the efficiency of power generation and delivery, and by requiring new generation capacity, ultimately costing ratepayers, by some estimates, up to $30 billion per year by 2050. The image at the left shows how these increased costs might be distributed across the country by the late century. All this to say that a concerted effort to improve efficiency is critical. Now, it's much easier to build new efficient buildings, but in the U.S., most of the building stock is not new. In fact, the typical building in the U.S. is about 35 years old. For these buildings, the major barriers to efficiency include upfront costs and long payback periods, and of course, split incentives among builders, owners, and occupants. With that in mind, tools like property-assessed clean energy or PACE loans can help remove financial barriers, and programs that speed the deployment of efficiency technologies in homes and commercial buildings can also help facilitate savings. These strategies can be enabled by local government action and certainly by electric utilities. Because cities include many types of buildings and end users, today we are focusing on examples of voluntary programs to promote the efficiency of residential and commercial buildings. There are many initiatives underway across the U.S., so we're obviously not going to cover them all. But we are going to get a good sampling of different ways to incentivize and support efficiency from the perspective of Kansas City and Duke, an investor-owned utility. So we're pleased to have these representatives here today. And without further ado, I'll first hand it over to Dennis Murphy, the Chief Environmental Officer for the City of Kansas City, Missouri. Dennis, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Amy. So I'm going to spend a little time here today talking particularly about residential PACE programs in Kansas City. Again, that's Property Assessed Clean Energy, which is a mechanism that allows building owners, whether they're residential or commercial building owners, to secure financing for energy efficiency improvements and or renewable energy projects and amortize those costs over an extended time period up to 20 years so that the cost savings on utility bills will help pay the loan repayment, which is made in the form of an annual special tax assessment. So we have both, and I'll talk in a moment, but we have both commercial and residential PACE programs operating in Kansas City, but today's remarks will focus particularly on the residential sector. We're fortunate in Kansas City that we have a mayor and a city council and a city manager that have strongly embraced sustainability as a core principle in all of our municipal operations. And by that, we mean a triple bottom line approach where we try to simultaneously achieve social equity, environmental quality, and economic vitality at the same time. And PACE has certainly proven to be an important element of our sustainability work here in Kansas City. We believe PACE is making our community more energy efficient, and we have actually affiliated with two statewide PACE programs in the state of Missouri. One is called the Missouri Clean Energy District. They offer both commercial and residential PACE loans, and then a Show Me PACE program, which offers only commercial loans. And we have been participating in PACE as a result of the action taken by our mayor and city council to enable us to affiliate with these statewide clean energy districts for about 4 years now, but only a couple of years have we been involved with residential PACE. HERO is the name given to the residential PACE program. It is operated by Renovate America on behalf of the Missouri Clean Energy District. It was launched a little over 2 years ago, October of 2016, and it's a turnkey program where homeowners work directly with HERO in order to assess opportunities for energy efficiency and renewable energy. They can evaluate the financial viability of such projects, identify projects to be implemented. They can secure financing through the HERO program, And then they also can connect directly with registered contractors to perform the work that's been approved through the HERO program. Next. So here are some outcomes that we've seen over the first 2 years of our residential PACE program. Almost 2,000 individual applications have been submitted. Over 1,000 of those have been approved, and almost 1,000 installations have been completed, 945. And that falls into two categories. 812 of those have been energy efficiency projects, which is not surprising. And we've also funded 133 solar energy installations on homes in Kansas City. The total amount of funding that has been provided in the 2 years is about $9 million. We've created a number of local jobs, and over the lifetime of these projects, it's estimated that we'll be saving 41 million kilowatt hours of electricity, and we'll be reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 26 tons. Next. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about some of the expectations that we have here in Kansas City for our PACE provider. One is that we expect them to do citywide marketing and program development for both energy efficiency and renewable energy for residential property owners. We intend for them to integrate their program activities with our local electrical utility and also our natural gas utility, but electrical utility in particular, because they have a fairly aggressive rebate program for energy efficiency. And we want to optimize the benefits to the participants in the PACE program by reducing the amount of money they need to borrow to implement their programs by taking full advantage of energy efficiency rebates that are offered through the utilities. It was also very important to us that we ensure that the provider has a strong customer service component. Although it's a turnkey operation by the provider, certainly the city wants to make sure that anything that we have enabled our residents to access has a strong customer service element to it so that they will be satisfied with their participation in the program. The other one that was particularly important to us is that we wanted the PACE provider to utilize local contractors to do the energy efficiency work and or installation of renewable energy systems, which are primarily solar panels on rooftops. And we wanted them to particularly align with the city's own emphasis on using women-owned businesses and minority-owned business enterprises. Next. So we think that we've learned several lessons from our 2 years of experience with the HERO program. One is that citywide participation engenders greater support by our elected officials. And by that, I mean that we track the installations of projects that are being implemented in Kansas City according to the distribution across our 6 separate council districts. And I'm pleased to say that we have widespread representation in each of those 6 council districts, which obviously makes the elected officials that authorize the program in Kansas City very pleased to see that their individual constituents are taking advantage of the program. I think also it's pretty clear that our PACE provider, Renovate America, operating the HERO program, has found it to be very effective to market and promote the programs at the neighborhood level and through homeowner associations. So they have done numerous outreach to those both homeowner associations and individual neighborhood associations in order to get the word out more effectively about the availability of residential PACE and explain the details of it. And again, getting back to that customer service element, making sure that the homeowners are satisfied with the work performed prior to them making any payments to the contractors significantly improves the credibility of the program. And that's one of the conditions that Renovate America has in our program, is that no payments are made to a contractor until the customer is satisfied with the work being done. Next. So we're often asked, what advice would we give to other cities that might be interested in establishing a residential PACE program? And I think that's particularly relevant. And one of the reasons why I'm focusing on residential PACE is that it is much less common than commercial PACE. Currently, commercial PACE enabling legislation has been enacted in more than 30 states, and about 20 states have launched some type of a commercial PACE program. However, on the residential side, there are only about 21 states that have enabled residential PACE to operate, but only 3 states currently have launched any kind of a PACE program at the residential level. That would be California, which was far and away the greatest market for residential PACE programs. But Renovate America, who had operated in California for several years, decided they wanted to branch out, and they chose the state of Missouri and the state of Florida, and so they are now operating residential programs in those 2 states as well. So in terms of advice for others that might be looking or considering the possibility of affording their homeowners the opportunity to have access to residential PACE as another tool to make energy efficiency improvements or install renewable energy facilities at their homes, it's important that in advance you create a foundation of shared objectives and expectations between the city and the program provider before the program's launched. It's also important when you're designing the program that you discuss in considerable detail to ensure that there's a good match between what the provider intends to offer and what you believe your customers will want. And then I would also suggest that it's a very wise move to ask questions of your providers that you may be considering regarding their prior performance in other jurisdictions to see what level of customer satisfaction, what the other cities where they've operated on have experienced in terms of satisfaction with their performance. Next. Other things that I would suggest is that as you're looking at creating a program, I think in most jurisdictions it's going to be important to ensure that your local businesses have opportunity to be involved in implementing the program, and also that there's job creation opportunities in the basic program design. We clearly wanted to ensure that not only were the residents that are participating in the program benefiting, but also small businesses in our community were getting benefits from program operation. And again, back to that customer service, I can't emphasize that strongly enough. Customer service is an absolutely key element in the program. And then I think it's worth noting that I would suggest that anyone that's considering creating a residential PACE program should expect that there might be some skepticism by some individuals in your community, and you could even anticipate there may be criticism from others who are not fans of PACE programs. We've actually encountered that here in Kansas City. I would say overwhelmingly, not only are elected officials strongly in favor of PACE, and certainly the participation we've had has indicated that it's been well received, but there are certain critics in our community that do not like PACE, and I can't say exactly why, but at any rate, you should be prepared for that, and that's where that due diligence will bear fruit down the road. So next. So there are some future areas we tend to explore further with our PACE programs. One is that we hope to increase customer interest in clean energy financing, particularly among owners of low-income multifamily housing. That actually falls under the commercial PACE program, but we think there are real opportunities of extending the benefits of PACE not only to the homeowners that are in position to borrow money, but also by promoting it as a tool for owners of low-income multifamily housing. And we think the real opportunity for that will be to promote it as gap financing for the owners of low-income multifamily housing when their current tax abatements are expiring and they're in the process of refinancing their projects. PACE can actually be an important part of the gap financing package that they put together, and it ensures that the projects that they're doing will be more energy efficient than they would otherwise be. Next. So That's basically an overview of some of our residential PACE work here in Kansas City. I would state that I believe it's been a highly successful opportunity for a public-private partnership here in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And just as a reminder to everyone on the webinar today, you can submit your questions anytime in that control panel there. And I just want to mention that there are a few resources out there, including the case study that is attached to the handout. Sorry for the feedback there. And PACE Nation also provides a lot of great resources about PACE in general, whether it's residential or commercial. And so if that's a website that you haven't seen before, it's definitely something to check out. So now I'd like to switch over to Tim Duff, our representative from Duke Energy, who's the General Manager of Regulatory Strategy and Evaluation at Duke Energy.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, as Amy said, I'm really pleased to be here and work with Duke Energy, who is, by customer count, the second largest utility in the country. We have service territory in Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. So we have a very broad and diverse geographic footprint in which we cover. But one of the things that is universal across our footprint is really a desire and recognition to partner with the cities in the communities in which we serve. So if you go on to the next slide. Thanks. So I think the first and most important thing is a need to find a common purpose. And I think the thing that is the easiest for the utility to identify with the city, and when I speak of utility, I'm speaking from an investor-owned utility or a private company standpoint, is really that despite the fact all of the cities and communities in the different service territories that I mentioned are very, very diverse in terms of their economic and demographic bases, there is one thing that is unique, and that is not unique between them, and that is really the desire for long-term viability and sustainability. And that's where a utility really aligns with the city, because in order for us to be successful as a business, we need the communities and the customers in those communities that we serve to be sustainable and viable. So it's really a group exercise to try and make sure that our utility service helps and aligns with what our cities and communities want to do from a sustainability standpoint. And with respect to this specific example, I'm going to be talking about energy efficiency. And I'm going to be talking about 3 different examples of partnerships where we've had our local utilities partner with cities in order to further the goals of sustainability and the energy transition for those different cities. So the first one I'm going to go through is a residential program that is actually being done outside of the utility, and I'll get into some reasons why for that. The second one is another residential program that we've worked with in partnership with one of a county and the city, really the city of Asheville, to try and bring forward a new design of a program to try and accomplish both our and their goals with respect to energy efficiency and mitigating the need for future generation. And then finally, a very unique behavioral non-residential program that was operated very successfully in Charlotte. But then, as we try and do, where we take successes and take it elsewhere, when we took it across the larger footprint, the program failed. And really, it stems from the fact that there wasn't the same kind of partnership and collaboration that we had with Charlotte. So kind of wanted to give 2 positive examples, and then one of an example that was positive that then really demonstrates the need for that partnership. Next slide, please. So first I want to talk about the North End Smart Home Kickstart program in Charlotte. Next slide. So the North End Smart District engagement really came about. It's an area of Charlotte, North Carolina, where generally it's a lower income population, and the city of Charlotte received a grant from the Knight Foundation to kind of create this engagement district and neighborhood projects. And so there were 4 Kickstart projects created, and one of the projects was smart homes. And really, this smart home Kickstart project was designed to help reduce the financial burdens of energy bills and help people stay in place in this area of the city that is really susceptible to a high level of energy burden. And so the city reached out to Duke, Amazon, Intel, and the Renewable Energy Transition Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization in Charlotte, and we partnered to execute this project. Next slide, please. So really when we started focusing on this, the project was designed to really understand how incorporating smart home technologies in these customers' homes in the lower income bracket, how it could really help them in terms of their quality of life as well as understanding their energy burden. So as I mentioned, the partners all got together, and where it really kind of got interesting was we ran into a position here where, because the city and Amazon and Intel wanted Duke to be a funder of these smart home technologies, which we were more than willing to do, but we ran into some regulatory constraints that because of utility cost effectiveness test scores requirements in North Carolina, the program, the high cost or paying for 100% of the equipment would not be cost effective, so we couldn't actually include those costs in utility energy efficiency programs. And the statute in North Carolina doesn't permit the utility to give customers anything that influences their usage, whether it's being done by the utility or the utility shareholders. You have to get approval. So we had to actually get a waiver of those utility rules to do this, so that Duke could fund 100% of these smart home technologies without having to get the necessary regulatory approvals. What we ended up doing was putting these smart home technologies into 32 homes, and in order to try and make sure that we were really isolating the impact these had, we tried to identify homes that had gone through previously one of our commission-approved energy efficiency programs called the Neighborhood Energy Saver Program, which is really a blitz in which we bring in a certified kind of contractor to go into homes in low-income neighborhoods and do quick inspections and install low-cost, no-cost measures such as weather stripping, faucet aerators, LED lighting. But we wanted to have that in there so to make sure that these customers really had already kind of harvested the low-hanging energy efficiency fruit and understand what the smart home technologies could deliver. So in February, we installed these bundles. It included an Echo Dot, a smart home hub, which Duke actually built itself, a smart thermostat, and 2 smart light bulbs, as well as a smart power strip and smart switches. And then we also developed an app so that all of these different technologies could be controlled through one point. A lot of smart technologies are currently the developers all have their own apps to control them, and we wanted to make it easy for these customers. So we developed an app where they could control all these technologies either through the Amazon Alexa Dot or through this app that would be available on a mobile device. So the pilot really hasn't been in place that long. We're not even to a year amount, but I wanted to give you the initial analysis. And really what it shows was we don't have enough information to really have conclusive results. However, just looking from March through July, we saw that there was 3.1% savings. And again, while that it's not conclusive because it's such a short period of time, you also have to remember that that period of time is during our shoulder months where you don't have a lot of heating and cooling load. So we anticipate that savings, which will be evaluated early next year, to go up. But what this project really showed us was that there is a real need for the utility to step up with funding. But in addition to providing the learnings on how to develop these technologies and how customers can interact, it really gave us insights into kind of the potential for further engagements where we can leverage up city programs such as this grant to try and get more customers to kind of take on more efficient and sustainable lifestyles. Next slide, please. The next one I want to talk about is the low-income pay-for-performance pilot that we developed for Asheville, North Carolina, and Buncombe County. Next slide. So we currently have a number of utility low-income programs, and those low-income programs are designed to weatherize homes. And as I said, we also have the neighborhood program that is designed to bring in and do low-cost measures. But in effort to coordinate with the city of Asheville on our Western Carolinas modernization, there is a real focus from that community because it's a constrained area, meaning it's hard to get power into and out of because of the mountainous area it's in. And so when we look at our load forecast, we believe that we need to build a new generating plant in that area so that there's enough power to meet peak demand. Well, in working with the city, we agreed that for over a 2-year period, we would try and increase the amount of efficiency and demand response that goes on in that area so that the need for that plant could either be eliminated or pushed out. And so one of the things that we did was, in working with stakeholders, we determined that there was an exceedingly high number of local agencies in Buncombe County and Asheville that were interested in helping these low-income customers become more energy efficient, but they had funding problems. And so what we wanted to do was come up with a new concept. And so if you go to the next slide, what we developed was a pay-for-performance pilot. And really, it was based off of something we had tried successfully in Cincinnati, in our Duke Energy Ohio service territory, where essentially, rather than the utility providing the weatherization service, we would go to agencies that were performing weatherization and essentially give them an additional funding stream by agreeing to purchase or buy the energy savings and peak demand reductions that they were achieving through their weatherization. What we'd heard is that a lot of these weatherization organizations, while they're trying to make the homes that they help more livable and safe, as well as save customers money, they really weren't focused specifically on generating measured energy savings. And so if we could give an additional funding stream, it could potentially allow them to attract more funding. And what I mean by that is it really would allow them to lever up the opportunity. So if I was a weatherization agency, I could go to some sort of a foundation and say, you know, if you provide me with a $500,000 grant to weatherize 1,000 homes, I can actually do 1,200 because I'll be able to sell the efficiency that's gained through the weatherization to Duke Energy and then get additional funds to do additional weatherization. And so it took a while, but we were able to file and get regulatory approval to test this and demonstrate that it works in Buncombe County. And so what we filed for was basically to get 150 homes through these channels, which in that area there's approximately 27,000 low-income homes that could be eligible to receive weatherization. And essentially it's giving us an opportunity to test this path and really accelerate the weatherization and efficiency to try and meet the city's goal of reducing the need for this additional generation plant, which also aligns with the company's needs of trying to make sure that it's operating its system in the most cost-effective manner possible. Next slide, please. The final example is the Smart Energy and Now pilot and Smart Energy in Offices program. And if you go to the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of background. So in the 2012 timeframe, the City of Charlotte came up with an initiative called Envision Charlotte. And it was kind of a first of its kind collaborative partnership with Charlotte City Center to create a environmentally sustainable the most environmentally stable core in the nation. And so there were 4 key pillars: energy reduction, quality air improvement, water reduction, and waste reduction. And Duke obviously was most engaged regarding the energy reduction. And so from the time this Envision Charlotte effort was kicked off, Duke worked to try and develop a program that would be the foundation for that energy reduction. And that program was called Smart Energy Now. And if you go to the next slide, I'll give some details. So Smart Energy Now was essentially designed to develop a community engagement within the office space in the downtown Charlotte footprint. And so essentially there were 72 buildings that were identified as meeting the office space criteria, and we worked with the building owners and the building tenants to develop energy efficiency campaigns that would allow those buildings to save energy. And it was a lot of feedback and engagement, but it was going hand in hand with the Envision Charlotte kickoff and campaign, which was focused on both energy and those other 3 pillars that I mentioned. Next slide, please. So we ran the Smart Energy Now pilot 2013 through 2015, and it had a goal of saving 5.0% kilowatt hours from all those 70 unique accounts that were participating in Charlotte. And as I said, it was a very successful program. We generated 4.6% verified kilowatt hour savings from those 70 participants, and that's an annual savings over for each of the 3 years. So the savings were significant, and we were really excited because we thought we were going to be able to take this model and move forward in our North Carolina and South Carolina footprints to try and bring the same success to other cities and communities within our utility footprint. Next slide, please. So after we commercialized the program, we began to offer it in other places. We actually got 199 different unique accounts. That includes the pre-existing Charlotte accounts as well as those outside of Charlotte. However, after running the commercialized program for 2 years, we found something that was very disconcerting with respect to the program, and that was that the buildings that were participants in the original Smart Energy Now program, they were still saving 5% annual kilowatt hour savings, while the buildings outside of Charlotte were at 0.3%. And unfortunately, when you look at the fact that over 50% of the accounts were now outside, those exceedingly low savings actually forced us, through our regulatory commission, to have to cancel the program not only outside of Charlotte, but within Charlotte. And so we really looked at it to try and understand what was so unique about the engagement and the partnership with Charlotte that made Smart Energy Offices not as successful as the original pilot. Next slide, please. And so what we found were there really are some keys to success. One, a mutual commitment from the city and the utilities up front. So when we did Smart Energy and Now, as I said, from the get-go, the city was engaged with Duke and Duke was engaged with the city, and we were both dedicated to trying to get these energy savings to be delivered as part of the Envision Charlotte effort. We had to do things for our efficiency program due to the Utility Regulatory Commission, but everything ultimately was aligned with both the city and the utility trying to achieve these savings. So we were able to leverage up some of the hype from this commitment. For example, when the Envision Charlotte campaign kicked off, and at the same time that we helped try and get the buildings to participate in Charlotte, there was a big kickoff ceremony in Charlotte where Edwin McCain came and sang and gave a concert. And just that hype and commitment within the city around a broader initiative really seemed to be one of the things that spurred the initial strength of it. The clearly defined goals and objectives. When we did it with smaller cities and smaller communities rather than the city of Charlotte, it was about energy. It was about simply those customers saving energy rather than about a broader goal or objective that was defined, which was to make that community the most sustainable around. And so that really had a big impact of having those clear definitions up front. And then the other thing is, I think a longer term relationship and commitment. I think largely due to the location of our headquarters, but also just from past experience, we had really dealt constructively with the city in the past, the city of Charlotte, and it was a newer relationship with some of the other cities, so we didn't have that closeness and working relationship that helped make the joint campaign so successful. Excuse me, flexibility and ability to adapt. I think this is one where you can look at that first Kickstart project that we had, where even though we had a plan to move forward, it required both the city and the other partners to wait on Duke to get the waiver of the rules from the regulator in order for us to participate. But because we were able to have that flexibility and work, the program was able to go off and still hit its deadline, even though we were missing a lot of the planning milestones. And then again, I think the other thing that's absolutely critical is, in addition to the defined goals, is to have defined roles. So if the utility is going to be the administrator, let the utility be the administrator. If the marketing is going to be done by the city, let the city do the marketing. And you can, by having those clear defined roles, you build yourself up a much better roadmap for success, because you're not going to have duplication of efforts, and you're also not going to have efforts slip through the cracks. But I think in closing, what I would say is those three examples are just some of the better ones that I could think of that really show how it's critical for a utility who really knows the most about the provision of energy, and in most cases, how to get efficiency within those cities, and the city who is really trying to achieve other broad goals that are reliant on efficiency. But when you put those two things together, you really do create sustainable and viable communities, so both the utility and the cities win. And that is all I had, Amy. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Tim. And we've been getting a number of questions while you've been sharing your remarks. And so I'll just dive right in with a few questions for Tim off the bat, and then we'll have a few questions for Dennis as well. So Tim, can you talk a little bit about what the return on investment for the smart home technologies will be? Will they pay for themselves at a certain point?
You know, that's really, we viewed this more as a collaboration and learning exercise. In most projects we do, we are looking for those returns. This one is uncertain because when you're funding 100% of it, we really can't estimate what the true market price would be. What we really wanted to see is what were the impediments to this piece of the population participating in the smart homes, and what is the opportunity for savings. Once we have a better idea of really what is the opportunity there, we would be able to better estimate what the return on investment would be. But again, this is kind of the intrinsic, you're strengthening your communities as well as getting learnings to potentially build programs in the future.
Great, thank you. And then shifting over to the example about Charlotte with the Smart Energy Now campaign, can you talk a little bit more about the specifics of what was done in that campaign to help reduce energy use?
Sure. So there were quite a few things done. I would say the first thing that was done was really a lot of work with the building operators. So each of the 70 buildings, Duke would put on training sessions for the building operators so that they could make sure that they were understanding how to best operate their buildings in the most efficient manner. And that was really effective in getting kind of the backbone of the energy usage to become more efficient. But on top of that, there was an engagement campaign with the tenants of the buildings. So, for example, one of the more famous ones they did was a Crab You're It campaign, where Duke engaged all of the different tenants, and they came up with energy champions, and those energy champions were then provided with red plastic crabs, and those red crabs were then handed out. And if anybody knows anything about crabs, they go to light. And so what the point of the campaign was, if people saw that lights were being left on in offices after people left, they would put a crab, and it was Crab You're It. And so then you had to hold on to the crab until you found somebody else that was leaving a light on. And that was an extremely effective campaign in getting customers to turn off the lights. There was another one that was called Resolve to Revolve. And it was focused on getting tenants in buildings to use the revolving doors rather than the regular opening doors. And they saw, I think, a 15% increase in the number of people that were using the revolving doors, which are far more airtight than using the regular conventional doors that were located on the sides of the revolving doors. There was a campaign called Adopt a Light, where each tenant would try and find a owner for a light on a floor or in a location, and then that owner would be responsible to make sure that it was turned on and off at the end of the day. And then there was a campaign called Make Cool Choices, where essentially people were rewarded for recording and performing sustainable actions. And if their team had the most sustainable actions, then there were prizes and games. Those are just some of the examples of the ones that I can think of at the top of my head.
Great, that's very helpful. And I think kind of piggybacking off of that line of discussion, a question from Jane Twitmeyer, I believe, focused towards this part of your set of examples. Did the number of participants or the specifics of tasks undertaken maybe make the difference between the program where it worked and maybe where it didn't?
I don't think it was the number of participants. I will say I think there was even though there was no formal competition as a part of the program, so we didn't compare. In the pilot, there wasn't you rank, 50th out of 70 buildings in terms of how much efficiency you've achieved. That wasn't done because they there was a concern about public shaming, if you will. But I will say that having the large community, I think, really helped give it momentum. And you know, one of the things that is unique to Charlotte is we have two very large banks located here in Charlotte, and a number of their buildings were participants, and they were taking it very personal to try and make sure that they were doing the most. So that dynamic may have helped, but I really do think that the overall Envision Charlotte campaign being launched at the same time as this energy efficiency program really gave it momentum and helped to kind of get that backing, because whenever Envision Charlotte was talking about all four pillars, so the air, the water, the waste, and the energy was being brought up, so it kept it fresh and relevant.
Great, thank you. Well, and so I guess kind of transitioning back over to Dennis a little bit. Dennis, Tim shared a little bit about some of the, one of the commercial initiatives that Duke Energy has had, some success, some lessons learned in. I know that Kansas City is doing a few things on the commercial side, including commercial PACE. So I wanted to just tee you up and let you, if there's anything you wanted to mention about that program. But we do have a few other specific residential PACE questions for you after that.
Yeah, in terms of commercial PACE, we've had fewer loans made, but they're bigger projects. A couple of the projects have been loans in excess of $1 million each. And most of them have been for renovation of existing buildings, either old warehouse buildings or old industrial buildings that were being repurposed into mixed-use development, or in some cases condominiums or lofts or other units. And so by using PACE, they were able to, again, secure some financing that probably was a part of a bigger package of financing that they were using for development work and redevelopment and renovation of the buildings. But they were able to make it more energy efficient and a better quality product that they could offer to the future tenants of the buildings. And there's one other thing that's not related to PACE, since we're talking about partnerships with utilities and cities, is that our local investor-owned electrical utility also had a program where they worked with their largest commercial and industrial customers to try to help them to identify opportunities for energy efficiency improvements. So we've had some similar kinds of experiences what Tim was describing in Charlotte.
Great, thank you. So thinking a little bit more about the enabling legislation for PACE in Missouri and in the other states, Dennis, do you know much about how they might differ between those three states where maybe the residential is active, or can you speak to anything about, what's working for the state enabling legislation there in Missouri?
Well, I don't know about California and Florida's legislation, but in Missouri, the Missouri General Assembly, when they were authorizing PACE to operate in the state of Missouri, created the opportunity for cities individually to create their own, what were called clean energy districts, that would provide PACE financing for either residential or commercial or both kinds of customers in their jurisdiction. Or collections of cities could come together and form a clean energy district and raise funds, issue bonds or other mechanisms, partner with a financial institution. But the ones that have really taken off that we had the opportunity to participate in were statewide, where they were established and open for any local government that enacted an ordinance to affiliate with these clean energy districts. In our case, both Missouri Clean Energy District and the Show Me PACE program. It provided access then for our residents and our building owners to work directly with the PACE providers on the turnkey services that I described in my presentation. But I can't really speak to whether Florida or California's programs differ in any substantive way.
And can you speak a little bit more to the local city ordinance that was passed to allow for Kansas City's participation?
Yeah, we actually had a couple of council members that had become aware of PACE as a financing mechanism and a tool that could be made available to building owners in our community that were pretty excited about it. And they wound up being the sponsors of both of the ordinances that were required for us to affiliate with the two PACE districts. And so that's what becomes critical, is that you've got some member of city council that sees the value of energy efficiency, whether it's at the residential sector, the commercial sector, or both, to help advance the sustainability agenda in our community. And that's what we had. So our ordinances were fairly straightforward and fairly simple. We merely adopted ordinances to say the city wishes to affiliate with the existing PACE programs that have been created and that are open to statewide participation. So we didn't have to create the administrative structure or do anything else. We had the ability to affiliate with up and running full service programs.
Right, thank you. And just for the folks on the phone, that there's a link to that ordinance within the case study in the case study is available for download in the control panel on under your handouts feature there. One last question for you, Dennis. You talked a little bit about how much investments have happened already since the residential PACE program has gone underway. Do you have any estimates on the economic impact from those projects, or maybe even the commercial PACE projects as well? I'm thinking of like job creation. We have some dollars invested, but dollars saved on utilities. I can go back to that one slide that has a few of those.
Yeah, the Renovate America reports that they believe that an estimate is 88 jobs have been created through the residential PACE program to date. So that's creating opportunities for local people to work on making energy efficiency improvements to residential buildings, or to install, in some cases, solar panels on the rooftops of homes in Kansas City. So in terms of the eventual total economic impact, it's hard to predict because it depends a lot upon what energy prices are going to be over the lifetime of the project. And most of these projects, a lifetime varies from 15 to 20 years. In the case of a solar installation, the solar panels are typically warranted for a period of 25 years. So it's difficult to say, but the premise of the program is that an energy audit will be performed to identify those measures that are most cost effective that the resident can choose from to decide what to implement with a projection of what the utility cost savings will be based upon some level of assumptions of either what the current price of electricity is or what the estimated and projected increases will be over a period of time. We've actually been going through a period here in Kansas City where our electrical rates have gone up fairly significantly, 30–40% in the last 5 to 6 years. So the cost effectiveness gets better as the cost of buying electricity off the grid increases. One of the things that was a challenge in Kansas City is that if you look at the situation 10 or 12 years ago, our residential electricity rates were about a third of what they were in California and on the East Coast. So that made the economics of it more challenging. But our rates have increased now to where the average residential rate is probably in the order of 10 to 12 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's made the economics much more favorable for people to borrow money and make investments to reduce future energy consumption.
Thank you for elaborating on that. That's great information. And I see that we are at the top of our hour now, so I want to be cognizant of that. There was one last question there about where these case studies are. If you're looking at your control panel in GoToWebinar, It's one of the last drop-down features. Should be under the questions tab after that. So it says handouts. There's 2 of them. And if you have any other trouble, you can just email me after this webinar, and I can certainly send you the links. My contact information is there on the screen. And I do want to thank our speakers for their time today and for all the attendees and all of your questions. I know there are a few that we didn't get to, so we're going to follow up by email with some of those. Thank you again, and we hope you have a great day.